the year 2017-18, NIBM added the online certification courses. Currently, NIBM has been active in three-dimensional spaces of training, both academic and executive, research, as well as consulting. The Institute really has traveled a milestone and looks forward to continue to work together to promote the values, interests, and policies that help the stakeholders to grow and thrive and strengthen ties between NIBM and the entire banking and finance industry. To begin our celebration of the 52nd Foundation Day, we have our chief guest, Sri B. Sambamurthy, former director and chief executive officer, IDRBT, and a renowned banker. Sri Sambamurthy will deliver the Foundation Day address. We are indeed indebted to him for accepting our invitation to deliver the Foundation Day lecture despite his busy schedule. While to the community of bankers and banking and finance, Sri Sambamurthy needs no introduction. Following the tradition, I will introduce him briefly, and he has already warned me not to have any elaborate introduction. Sri Sambamurthy, a chartered accountant for last 40 years of banking and related experience in various banks, IT, electronic payments related organizations. I will just mention some of the brief highlights of his career. He was chairman NPCI, National Payments Corporation of India, and as well as director of as RBI nominee. He was director and CEO of IDRBT till 2014. And as you all know, IDRBT was also established by RBI. And besides academic activity of postgraduate and PhD program, IDRBT operates gateway for NEFT, Infinite, National Payment Switch, etc. He was chairman of a PSU bank till 2008. He served on the boards and governing councils of some various organizations like Data Security Council of India, Indian Institute of Banking and Finance, Insurance Information Bureau of India, Bandhan Bank, Clearing Corporation of India, IDBI Intake, and others. He served in a number of committees like Mobile Banking, Financial Inclusion, IT Vision for RBI, Payment Vision for RBI, Export Advisory, Standing Committee of Forex Clearing, etc. He served as a member of the Apex Committee of Technology, Information and Forecasting Council of Government of India and Committee on Cloud Computing, Government of India. He has authored nearly 40 articles on banking and finance. He has decided to talk on India's case for central bank digital currency, an issue of topical relevance. Almost to the drawing board of all central banks, CBDC appears very prominently these days. We have seen number of speeches from various central bank governors, chairmen, and we also know the various countries have progressed in this direction in various ways. So I still remember his video in Business and Banking Dialogue, which is available on YouTube, and I liked it. And I'm sure students are eagerly waiting to hear this particular, what in their lingo is called a hot topic. And I request Mrs. Sambamurthy to deliver this 52nd Foundation Day lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Padare, for the nice introduction.
Sir, you may have to be a little louder.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
yes,
sir.
I can hear. Yes.
Thank you. It is indeed always a pleasure to be with NIBM. I would have loved to be there physically in this Sylvan surroundings there. I know I love that place. I visited a number of times as a student, as a guest faculty. In fact, some of the past directors have been my personal friends. Alan Pereira, Dr. Saha, Mr. Madhopajaya, Biredji. I know a number of them. I used to have long conversations on professional matters for mutual interest and all. In fact, one of our foundation, SYX Foundation director, where we are not for profit, foundation we created, he was telling me yesterday when I told him that I'm going to talk. Then he was telling, I believe he's been a guest faculty for almost 25 years. One Mr. Chagaraja on Forex matters. He's an expert in Forex, he was telling me. And even Syndicate Bank, I remember when we had a board subcommittee on ALCO 20 years ago, Dr. Saha, I think then director, was a member of that ALCO board subcommittee. right from designing the formats right up to working out the models for ALM and all that. DS helped us. That's how we are so closely associated with NIBM. NIBM, I know that personally I am benefited. The institutions I work with are greatly benefited. I remember very popular programs like branch management, credit management, treasury management. I don't think it's always NIBM is a mecca for any practicing banker. So I'm quite happy to see that over 52 years, NIBM stayed relevant. That I think speaks for the dedication and the passion with which the faculty have been working. It's not easy for an institution to survive, live alone, thrive for over 5 decades because in this fast changing world. So it has been thriving is a testimony to the quality of the programs that your faculty deliver. I remember that I think 2 magazines, Vinimaya, I think was a must read for all the practicing bankers, and another journal, Prajnan, I think is still there, I was seeing, more kind of research oriented and a kind of policy inputs that they used to give. So I would like to compliment the director, the faculty, the staff, the students, I think for their wonderful contribution and for their contribution to the banking industry in capacity building especially. So in fact, I think NIBM has forced very close links with industry. I think it's one of the platforms where it closely works with industry. I think that's one of the secrets for staying relevant. So once again, I'd like to thank NIBM for having me on this momentous occasion. It's a great privilege. I accept it with all humility. So let me share some of my thoughts on the central bank digital currency, which is the topic for the occasion and all that. If we step back a little about from CBDC, the subject proper, the way we live, the way we work, the way we learn, the way we socially engage, the way we kids learn, millennials learn, the way we consume entertainment, almost every walk of life is digitized, and financial services is no exception. But the financial services is getting digitized at unimaginable speed. It's a huge challenge and opportunity for the bankers. So money is central to our daily life. It is also getting digitized, and we need to see CBDC in this larger context. Digitization of the economy contributes significantly to GDP growth, and one would argue that digitization of currency is a natural extension of digitizing our economy, besides achieving our objective of cashless society. So before I lay my thoughts on CBDC, it's important to understand why the CBDC has come to light, especially in the last 2 years, 3 years. If you see literature for 3 years ago, you will find very little literature on the CBDC. One person, we don't know, this is called Satoshi Nakamoto, but no one knows whether he's an individual, is a real name, pseudonym, or a group of researchers. He's the man, assuming he's a man. In fact, I think day before yesterday, his statue was also unveiled, but it looks like alien because no one knows. No one has seen his face. That's the problem. This one man, assuming he's one person, or maybe 2 persons and all that, they've done such a kind of wonderful, highly impactful, highly consequential innovation. Over 100 central banks all over the world, over 100 governments sit up and take notice of this one single innovation of 1% or 2%. I think that's the power of innovation. And it's very nice of him. He made it as an open source project and left it. So what did this Satoshi Nakamoto do? What is his motivation and provocation for probably introducing cryptocurrency concept? I don't know how many students have read his original research paper, 2008, which he has released on peer-to-peer network for the payment systems. I think it gives you, I would recommend all students to probably to thoroughly engage with that research paper. You get a lot of insights, a lot of innovative ideas to do that. So what is the provocation? If Satoshi Nakamoto is a provocation for all governments to think of central bank digital currency, what is the provocation for himself? The provocation for him, he says, today to make payments, simple payments from one person to another person is a very long chain. So that payer will have to go to his bank, and this bank will go to an intermediary. The intermediary will go to the recipient bank, and the recipient gives the money to that. It's a long chain. It is a slow, painful, not convenient. So he thought that why not we remove the intermediary itself? Why not the receiver and payer directly pay each other like we pay the physical cash? I think that's one of the motivation. He thought that intermediaries are slow, inefficient, costly, and not convenient at all. That is one of his motivation for him to do that. That's how he has come out with the concept of Bitcoin, which is nothing but a kind of, which is called cryptocurrency, one of the cryptocurrency, where it's a peer-to-peer private network without any intermediary, without any bank. One can transfer money to the other. So that is his concept. So what did he do ultimately? I think 2009-10, the first Bitcoin was rolled out. And then, as they say, rest is history. Now, over 60, 70 countries, these cryptos, whether it is currency or asset, a lot of hotly debated and all that, it is working. There are exchanges, crypto exchanges, which are active in this. So there, many of these countries regulate, some of these countries don't regulate, some countries have banned it, but you can't ignore the innovation, you can't ignore the insights that Satoshi Nakamoto probably has left for the financial services industry itself. Even though 2008, it was 2008-9, the first Bitcoin was rolled out, many of the central banks did not take much notice. It is only in the last 2-3 years when more and more people started embracing this cryptocurrency. So central banks thought that it is time for them to digitize this currency. In fact, I was thinking that why even central banks also want to jump into this central bank digital currency, why they want to do the digitizing currency. So I was recently, one of my friends has forwarded a video on a webinar, a conversation between two people on cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. So the youngster, tech entrepreneur, is explained what is the concept of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, what are the advantages. And he said one response to a query, he said, if someone has invested 1 lakh rupees in 2010, today it is worth 500 crores. Right? 1 lakh in 2010 is now worth 500 crores somebody. So it's enough that I think it fires the imagination of millions of people to join the bandwagon of cryptocurrencies. Even though, of course, a lot of central banks, governments have serious reservations on this issue. So cryptocurrency is nothing but a kind of, you will say that, an algorithm. It's basically, it's a kind of algorithm. Like you have database like Oracle or RDBMS, it is another unique database where without intermediaries, the receiver and payer can connect in a peer-to-peer network. It will be anonymous. So that exactly lies the problem. So I'm not getting into technicalities how this Bitcoin is produced. Because when you don't have central authority, because the concept of Satoshi is there should not be any intermediary because they're costly, ineffective, slow, not convenient and all that. So when there is no central authority, you would be certifying all the data that flows. So the data lies in each block, and then someone has to verify. That is called mining. So if someone can verify the data in a block, that block gets added to the blockchain. So which is the underlying technology. And then distributed ledger makes it a peer-to-peer network where the transactions once written cannot be erased, which is called immutability. That's another advantage of this whole concept. So this briefly, this is how these Bitcoins are produced. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, especially concerns, because this cryptocurrency, which is anonymous, which works on is a private currency, can be used for illegal activities like drug trafficking, anti-money laundering activities, terrorist financing, and so many other illegal activities and all. That's a serious concern for that. So many of these countries, we say that why not we ourselves introduce the digital currency based on probably building on the blockchain and distributed ledger, which are the underlying technologies of Bitcoin. Separate Bitcoin, but use those technologies and build that. That is how the motivation for the central banks one can find in the last 2 to 3 years. In fact, I was listening to one of these very leading central bank, which is very good in this, which is in the digital payment space. 2-3 years ago, he said that, no, why you want digital currency, that our payment system is very efficient and all that. We don't need this currency, don't need any digital currencies and all that. It's all okay. But the very fact that more and more people are getting into this bandwagon of cryptocurrency, a central bank has a fundamental duty for consumer protection, if not anything else. And it is for the governments to see that illegal activities are not conducted using this cryptocurrency, this kind of misuse this. So that briefly is the background. That is basically the provocateur, I will call Satoshi Nakamoto, for the central bank digital currencies. So why central bank? Then is an official currency, not a private currency. There is problem with these cryptocurrencies. There is no issuer, no one takes the liability, no one knows who has issued it, and there will not be any kind of customer grievance kind of redressal mechanism and all that. Nobody has seen it. Many people think that it has no intrinsic value. And the second reason that these people have given cryptocurrency advocates, mostly tech entrepreneurs, the central banks all over the world are printing money, which will only end up in inflation at point in time or other, maybe inflation of various assets, which we are already witnessing. Because since 2008-9, various central banks have printed almost $25 trillion to prop up the economy. So that is also a worry. They say that whereas the cryptocurrency, there is a limit up to which they can produce this currency, which is 21 million till 2140. So they believe that this will be a better monetary policy tool. But as we go along, I would explain that why it is not so. So as a corollary, another type of cryptocurrency or asset has now come into being, which is called stable coin. A stable coin, unlike cryptocurrency, is backed by an asset. The asset could be reserve currency. The asset could be any other financial asset. The asset could be backed by any commodity. It's not a clean one. But somebody compares it, with the poker chips. Remember that gambling clubs, if somebody wants to play any casino, you give currency and then he'll give the tokens and you play on the tokens. So similarly, stable coins, if I want a dollar stable coin, I pay cash and I get the stable coin, which I can use in the network wherever they accept it. Stable coin is slightly better because there is an issuer. It is backed up by an asset. So I'll be able to claim, but there are also issues in this sense. It is trying to become an official currency. They say it is a medium of exchange. It's a unit of account. So it should be treated as a kind of, it is also store of value, because if it's a dollar stable coin, it is backed up by $1. Again, yet again, the big tech started entering. Facebook has come out with earlier Libra, that is what called Dime now. They said they would introduce a stable coin. So there are a lot of regulatory challenges. There is a pushback. When once Facebook launches Dime on full scale, it can disrupt a lot of, I would say that a lot of payment systems across the world. Not merely payment systems, even financial systems. Why? Because Facebook has a user base of 2 billion. 2 billion. I don't think, even if we almost close to the total population of, say, India and several other countries, US, Europe, all put together. On one single platform, you can serve 2 billion customers. Forget about all banks. Even if you add all banks, that you will not be able to get that kind of price. Secondly, yes, lot of capital do that because his market cap is probably, it surpasses even the market cap of almost top 10 banks in the world. So in case it comes as global, it will be a global currency because it can be a dollar stable coin, it could be euro stable coin, it could be even Indian rupee stable coin. When once he launches it, then the monetary policy, financial stability of the many countries can be. Because any central bank basically controls the money supply either through a rate, interest rate, or through quantitative easing. But Facebook stable coins will not be under the control of any central bank. So stable coins is another threat. Both the stable coins and cryptocurrencies, there is no deposit insurance. There is no well-defined consumer protection. There is no well-defined regulations in this country. And liquidity is also another issue because one advantage of a central bank digital currency is central bank which comes in wherever there is a squeeze in the money markets, financial system to additional liquidity, only a central bank can inject. Because if there is a drop in the value of the currencies or the assets of stablecoin backs, so it can get into a liquidity freeze and which can collapse in no time because it cannot supply liquidity. And there will be market risk, there will be credit risk of whoever issues the stablecoin. So G20 is now grappling with how to come regulate this. Christine Lagarde famously said of ECB, fight fire with fire. It is not easy to regulate big tech. Even US Congress is grappling with this, regulating these things. So what do some Nobel laureates say about the cryptocurrencies? Joseph Stiglitz, one Nobel laureate, said, there is no need for crypto. Crypto shall be shut down. CBDC is better for macro management. Paul Krugman, another Nobel laureate, said, Bitcoin is evil. What problem does it solve? Which other technologies cannot solve? Robert Schiller says crypto is a psychological market. Ultimate source of value is ambiguous. Don't call Bitcoin a bubble, but is an epidemic. Robert Merton, another Nobel laureate, said it's not a currency at all. The only legal tender is controlled by the government. And some of the economists like Kenneth Rogoff, who has written that, curse of cash, he said, crypto is worse than the cash. In a CNBC Fed survey, 80% of the Wall Street economy strategists believe Bitcoin is a bubble. Wall Street Journal in a survey found that 76% of the economists polled by their economic policy research body believe that cryptos could jeopardize could cause a crisis. Christine Lagarde, who is very vociferous for us on this, they said cryptos have weak fundamentals. They do not qualify as retail investment even. Cryptos are not currencies, full stop. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said, they have no intrinsic value. They have only extrinsic value. That means the value given by the users. Buy them if you are prepared to lose the entire money. Very strong word, of course. So similarly, these central banks also have reacted with a lot of skepticism, a lot of concern, how to regulate the proliferation of these stable coins. So these are the motivations and provocations, if you call, for a central bank to start thinking of launching their own digital currencies. Now, coming to the subject proper, it is only central bank which can provide a trusted money to public. And this has been so for hundreds of years, not now. So what do the consumers seek? Consumers seek convenience, low cost, universal access, speed, and security. Central bank seeks stability and efficiency. But now the world is changing. Probably technology is disrupting several industries, as we know. Now these cryptos and stable coins are trying to disrupt the central bank functions themselves. So that is a cause for concern. Bank for International Settlement, which is the central bank. I'm coming to the subject proper now. In a recent survey, they found 86% of the countries are in the survey they've surveyed are exploring and experimenting with the launch of central bank digital currencies. 60% are doing proof of concept. 14% of the countries they've surveyed are deploying projects. So here also motivations, well, so many countries are doing it, motivations would also vary from country to country. For instance, for China, the motivation for CBDC, which is far ahead of all countries, because it has already launched a pilot project in 4 cities, it has achieved a lot of progress, in fact. And there also 90% of their payments are digital, but still they want to do the central bank digital currency for 2-3 reasons. One is that geopolitical strategy. They see a lot of geopolitical risk, especially the sanctions that the Western countries may impose anytime. Second, being a communist country, they would like surveillance, how people are spending, where they're spending, how much they're spending. And secondly, thirdly, their payment system is dominated by 2 private organizations, Tencent and Alipay. Of course, now they have also clamped a lot of restrictions on that. So People's Bank of China, that central bank of China, has no clue of the spending habits of various people. But genuinely, this information is also required for policy interventions as well. So China's motivations are basically geopolitical and surveillance purposes and all. Whereas Sweden is another extreme case. In fact, Sweden, the cash GDP ratio is less than 2%. 98% is again all digitized. They are far advanced. So when you have 98% digital currency, why you want to do this? So basically, again, the problem is they have completely lost touch with the payment systems in the country. They absolutely have no insights. Their basic payment system insights are very essential for monetary policy insights and as well as financial stability interventions. So Sweden also is launching a central bank digital currency. In fact, they've gone a step ahead. They're trying to have a chip in the wrist itself. So you probably raise your wrist and then transactions takes place. I think they said about already 2,000 people have got the chip on the wrist, which is now used as for the e-krona. Japan, for a different reason, because the last 20 years, last 2 decades, the economy is not growing. And then one of the consumption has come down and they've made the interest rate 0. Still, the people are not spending. And then even negative rate they went. So Japanese people responded by just taking cash out of the banks and keeping under pillow. Because every year capital gets reduced. People are not spending. So motivation for Japan is different. So why I'm telling you these motivations are different, because India, when I say India's case for CBDC, we have to find out our own use case. Even BIS says there is no one size fits all. Each of the country has to find its own context and purpose of introducing the digital currency. See, basic functions, whatever be the technology, see the basic objectives of a central bank. What are the 3 basic objectives are there? Growth, employment, and then inflation control. Different countries have different priorities. Different countries have given different mandates to the central banks of this country. So for instance, our focus is on inflation control. That does not mean that it will be in isolation to the impact on the growth and impact on employment. But the mandate, an inflation target of 4% plus or minus 2 is given. Some other countries, it is growth. Some other countries, it's employment. Some other countries, is a combination of all these 3. So how do these central banks achieve these 3 objectives? A, by ensuring financial stability. B, by ensuring monetary stability. C, by ensuring an efficient and secure payment system. So when you talk of, so the purpose of central bank digital currency, once we the countries launch should ensure a financial stability, should ensure monetary stability to ensure that the payment system is secure and is of high integrity. And the problem with the cryptocurrencies is they impact financial stability, they can impact monetary stability, they can impact the payment systems. How monetary stability, for instance, assume that Facebook launches Dime in a full scale, then obviously the money supply will not be under the control of the Bank of India. The financial stability, if these people attract by offering a good interest rate higher than what the banks, so the banks probably may also get disintermediated. So we are seeing already in our country, Google Pay, big tech, almost contribute 90% of our UPI, such a kind of high concentration. And they don't make money in this payment system. Again, on the other hand, they incur loss, they give a lot of incentives. Why they are doing? Because they collect a lot of data of the consumers, they are building profiles. They think they can cross-sell a lot of products. And the banks can get disintermediated. So the reasons for the central bank digital currency, especially in our case and most of these cases, is to ensure monetary stability, financial stability, especially financial stability. When I say that, ensure that the banking system does not get disintermediated. I'll say that how it comes in the digital policies and all. So whatever be the technology, they cannot change the policy objectives. Be it Bitcoin, be it your stable coin, be it CBDC. They cannot change the objectives, three objectives of growth, employment, and inflation. And they have to subserve all these three objectives, whatever may do. So whatever design principles they decide for CBDC, they've got to keep in mind. So for instance, supposing if the CBDC currency, they said it's nothing but a digital representation of the physical note. Instead of having a physical note, you have a digital form. If they say, supposing there are two ways of issuing a digital currency, direct one is account based, second is two-tier based. Supposing it's an account based, as citizens, we can directly have an account with the Reserve Bank, right? In a currency, we don't get any interest. So why people would keep the money with the central bank and not the commercial bank? Because in case there is any anxiety about the banking system, people may shift the money from a commercial bank to the central bank. If the commercial banks lose deposits, and it will affect their credit intermediation and credit creation, money creation already, which is low enough. So when they decide on the design, the interest rate, they need to keep in mind the implications for financial stability of this country and monetary policy stability of this country. Secondly, if we'll discuss when the other aspects when we come to policy. So somebody asked me, what a wonderful UPI system, which is almost run rate of 3 billion, it may go to 5 to 6 billion in the next 1 year or so. So our payment system is already in advanced stage. It's a global reference benchmark. It has become UPI for most of the country, including USA. Why do you need? So even though the UPI is clocking 3 billion, 4 billion, the unique user base is hardly 200 million. It has not gone beyond that. Whereas we have 600 million internet connections, we have got almost 1 billion phones we have. We have got 600 million Jan Dhan accounts. Even Jan Dhan accounts are not covered in this UPI. They don't use it. So there are a lot of issues and all that. So if you have a central bank digital currency, which is as easy as cash, which does not require a bank account. So supposing I go to a shop and then I want to buy something, I'll take 100 rupees from my physical wallet. I give it to him. It goes to the cash box of the merchant. So when I say CBDC, from my mobile phone, it should directly go to the mobile phone of the merchant without going through any bank, because there is no settlement delay, there's no cost to the merchant. It should be as easy as possible. So UPI, even though it has run rate of very high and all that, there is still a huge scope for financial, probably have an access, universal access, I would say. And that's the only way we can do that is central bank digital currency. Second, it's also a tool for formalizing the economy. So as per some estimates, 50% of our economy comes from the informal economy. 80% is now employed in informal economy. So if you want to formalize the economy, one way of doing it is probably have large quantities of digital CBDC so that they can be brought into the financial system. And third most important motivation for India to go for CBDC is the cost of currency and its movement. The cost of printing is only 4,000 crores, but the cost of moving cash is estimated at 1.7% of GDP as per a Visa study of 2016. Because our ATMs themselves are almost disbursing about 40 lakh crores cash today, even with the UPI clocking about 3 billion transactions. Imagine the cost of moving, securing, keeping it safe for these 40 lakh crores. What happens even today? If I want cash that I go to ATM, I draw money, I go to shopping, I give him cash, and he goes to his bank, and again, bank puts it in the ATM. The merry-go-round. And this is estimated to cost about 1.7%. But most of them is invisible to the consumer, so they think it's quite convenient and all that for them. 1.7% of our GDP almost comes to what, about 3.5 lakh crores. So I don't say the entire currency can be digitized and we save 3.5 lakh crores. Even if you save about 20%, it is huge money. You can save about 50 to 70,000 crores. So then, unless you give an alternative to private cryptocurrencies and stable coins, it's likely most of the people get attracted, as I said, because as the interview said that 1 lakh invested in 2010 is 500 crores. Who is not tempted to do that speculative activity? So we need an alternative for the crypto and stable coins. Another reason is that, tax evasion. You know that as per some estimates, 20% of the GDP is unaccountable. And this means a loss of 3.2% of GDP as accrued taxes. So you can imagine the kind of probably revenue collection that can accrue to the government. So you have enough motivations for India to go for digital currency. I think one, basically to save a lot of cost. Many of these citizens may not understand the cost because they are not impacted. If you pay cash, that I don't have any cost to him. Even merchant may not have cost unless the bank charges. If you have a card, there is an MDR. There's some cost to the banks as well to pay to the network. If I use UPI, also has a cost to the banks and the interest. See, cash, but cost of cash is 1.7%, which probably citizens not feel. But at a macro level, it is a cost to the economy. It would make that economy so to that extent costly and inefficient. So I think these are 5-6 reasons that are enough, I think, to go for a central bank digital currency. I'll go quickly, I think, of this thing. Second, Nandan Nilekani committee report says, despite all these UPI increase, the per capita digital transactions in our country is only 50. That means transactions per person per year is 50 in our country, even with this kind of high volume of UPI, whereas in Singapore it is 700 per capita. Most of these countries is 500. So there is a huge scope for it. Another reason for it is, even though we have 800, 900 million debit cards, the acceptance infrastructure is very awfully low as compared to this 800 million. It's about, you hardly have about 5 to 6 million, even the QR code, it does not 10 million. So acceptance infrastructure is not growing because it's not profitable for banks to do. There's a cost to the merchant, there's a cost to the bank, there's a cost to the service provider, and they find it's not viable. So if you have a digital currency which straight goes without any intermediary from one mobile phone to another phone, I think it's the usual purpose. So cash is the most expensive, but it's the most convenient and no cost for the citizens and consumers and all. So what do we need to do, having made out a case for CBDC? So how much time I have, Dr. Ray? Can you hear me? Hello? Dr. Ray, how much time I have?
Yes, yes, no, you have, sir, you have around 10 minutes more,
Okay. Then I'll stop. Quickly, I'll just do that, right?
around 10, 15 minutes, you can take over. There's some questions are coming, but you can
Okay.
take 10 to 15 minutes.
Right, okay.
Is that okay?
All right, fine. Lost this thing. So now BIS, Bank for International Settlement, has taken the lead instead of each country reinventing the wheel. They have created a lot of groups and trying to do proof of concept. They have gone beyond survey, and they also found out some use cases. They're also running some pilots and all. But at the same time, they don't want to, as I said, prescribe any particular model for any country. It is for each country to find out its own use case. But they have broadly given 3 design principles. They said, as I said, digital currency can have an interest bearing or not interest bearing. It can be easily converted from a reserve to the CBDC. But at the same time, that whatever way they want to do it, but they should ensure that the CBDC design shall not harm any financial stability or monetary stability or bank intermediation. And they should not impede the policy objectives, as I said, that growth, employment, and inflation. Number 2, second principle, they said this new ecosystem should coexist with the existing cash payment systems and should also complement new innovations that may come. And number 3, it should be designed in such a way, the structure should be such that it should improve efficiency and encourage innovation through public and private partnerships. They recognize the value of this private sector, especially for innovation. So having decided on these 3 principles, so what India needs to do, we need to bring in a cryptocurrency bill. Number 2, that we need to bring in Data Privacy Act, especially a lot of data gets collected if there are intermediaries. So there should be purpose limitation, there should be time limitation. The issue of anonymity versus privacy issues need to be properly articulated. We need a legal framework. RBI Act needs to be amended, especially Chapter 3 of Section 2228 to bring in digital currency as a part of this legal tender. We need amendments to Payment and Settlement Act. We need to probably an enactment to specifically say CBDC is also legal tender. And we need institutional framework. Who would operate? Would it be a direct account or would it be a 2-tier system? So what is the institutional framework? What is the governance framework? What is the operational oversight and supervision? So then standardization, because there will be a lot of players now in the CBDC. So all the players, I think, need to follow certain standards. And then we need to, the literacy and awareness. Then we need a grievous redressal system as well. And we need to build trust in this new world. So let me tell you that what risk it can have implication for a commercial bank. Supposing there is a coupon, as I said, there is an interest rate on the attached to CBDC, people will have probably keep it safe to, people will keep it safe to, just a second. People will keep it safe to keep it with the central bank rather than a commercial bank. We have seen that kind of situations arising off and on, where people, there is almost a virtual run and some of the banks and all that, even Reserve Bank has come to the rescue saying that we are behind, we will provide, and sometimes they can't provide. So in such situations, what happens if it's an account and if there's no limit, the run could only be accelerated and aggravated. Secondly, you see, we have 28 lakh crores cash in the system. We have 28 lakh crores in the system, but we have 145 lakh crore deposits. We have 145 lakh crore deposits in the system. So if the deposits are also substitutable to CBDC in times of anxiety, in times of crisis, the citizens may be tempted to shift the whole money to central bank of this country. So so for 28 lakh crores, are we going to risk these 150 lakhs kind of crores of inflation? We have again, as I said, 28 lakh crores currency, 180 lakhs reserve money. So currency as a share of reserve money is less than 18%. So when they design the principles, they need to be very clear what they want to substitute. Is only currency to currency, or is it bank deposits or reserve money as well? Now, my guess is obviously it will be only cash, that too, only part of the cash, not entire 26 lakhs can be converted into CBDC, because BIS principle also has cautioned CBDC should coexist with the existing systems. And then, but I find another use case, basically cross-border payments. See, we get a lot of remittances from the Middle East, mostly from low-income earning people in these countries, almost $60 billion that will come. As per World Bank estimate, it costs about 6.8% remittance, which is very high. And there are a lot of, secondly, there are a lot of friction points for these interbank payments in dollars. So they're costly, they're slow, they're not transparent, there are too many layers. Correspondent bank relationship is very difficult nowadays. A simple remittance of say $500, let me give you an example. $500, somebody, an Indian worker in say Dubai wants to remit $500, about 30,000 or even 20,000 rupees. So what happens, he has to pay there, he ends in the local dirhams. Then the exchange company will convert into rupees, he pays an exchange rate there. And then it comes to India, it comes to Vostro. The exchange company will reimburse the paying bank here to a Nostro account in US, which is in a dollar. Again, there is again a conversion factor there. And then that money will also be cited on the second day, third day. That Nostro bank also will levy some charges to the receiving bank. So expensive, and nowadays it's so difficult to even to have a correspondent banking relationship. Another friction point is time zone, which itself gives a lot of risks and all that. Assessing standards are different. Reconciliation is another big problem in this, the international remittances. And in many cases, the remitting bank has to pre-fund. Otherwise, the beneficiaries will not get the money. And then even if you have Western Union and some of these other private companies, they're very expensive and all. So I think for India, cross-border payments, I think is another use case for us to go for CBDC. And Bank for International Settlement has already come out with 3 models for the international payments. So one basically is a compatible model. They said each one will continue with whatever they have, but have some common standards so that the number of correspondent banking relationship can be reduced. So that messaging standards, there's no issue. Reconciliation, there's no issue. Second model, they said interlink both the systems through some technical interfaces so that remittances will be much faster. And the third model, they have said it should be a multi-currency system. Today, the problem is even if you have CBDC, we'll have CBDC rupee and CBDC dollar. And then when once the remittance comes here, and then there is a conversion here, supposing there is an exporter here, we have $50,000 exports. Even if you have CBDC both in US and India, somebody has to convert that exchange rate. So if you are dealing with 50, 60 countries, you need 50, 60 corridors for converting the currency and all. On the other hand, if you have a multi-currency system through one corridor, you can have the currency conversion, which is one of the major costs for these international payment systems. So I think we have enough use cases. Of course, I can come out with a lot of use cases and all, but I think these are enough to do that. But as I said, that while we discourage cryptocurrencies and stable coins, I don't think it will be possible to ban, because in India we have a Supreme Court judgment say that there is no law under which RBI can prohibit. That's how they're doing, but they need to follow that KYC, anti-money laundering, FATF guidelines. So, but even then, it is growing. While we don't have official numbers, there are supposed to be 15 million people who now own Bitcoin or trade Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. And the value is estimated about 7-8 billion. The worry is that it's growing very fast. That one narrative is enough. But as Andrew Bailey said, you invest in Bitcoin if you are prepared to lose the entire amount. So, as you know, cryptocurrencies come with a lot of substantial risk to macro stability, financial integrity, consumer protection, and environment. But at the same time, the underlying technologies like blockchain, distributed ledger, smart contracts are very important. So as they say that don't throw the baby with bathwater, while Bitcoin can be disgraced, but we need to build probably another economy on the foundations of blockchain, distributed ledger, and the smart contracts. And I guess CBDC will be using these technologies in some form or other, because otherwise we don't have the infrastructure. Another, I think RBI needs to do is to create a CBDC D&R Research Institute, not R&D, D&R. In fact, when I joined, it is IDRBTI, it's not IRDBT. I was asking when I joined why it is not R&D but D&R. They said development is the focus. It's not simply about academic work of contributing articles, writing journals and books and all. And whatever knowledge that is created, it should be converted into development. And CBDC is a very long haul. It's not that we can do in 1-2 years and the use cases go on developing. And then also it helps the banks to develop a lot of business models on the building block. Today on NEFT, today on UPI, that the banks have build their own business models. So that is the value addition that they do. And then CBDC, in my sense, is an opportunity to modernize financial sector and also broader economy also as well. And then as somebody said, future is faster than we think. So it's time for us. I think that's why Reserve Bank Deputy Governor recently has already shared that their thoughts and the work they're preparing. RBI Governor also, I think, has indicated probably by the year end they will be launching a pilot project. And he's also cautioned about the risks involved in this cryptocurrency and stable coins. But he can RBI only can give a warning, but unless you give an alternative, the people at large who are showing a lot of interest. Having said that, one final thought let me share in my experience at IDRBT and then also in PCI both. One example, no doubt technology probably improves the efficiency by huge factor. Technology no doubt helps us to build productivity. In fact, want an explosion of productivity without technology. But when we are using technology in financial sector, we need to be conscious of the economic, political, social, cultural risk that these two take. Probably these technologies face, especially big tech. I remember when WhatsApp joined UPI, that we were all excited, and Facebook wanted to join, or Google Pay wanted to join. Of course, they dominate the scene now. But we now understand the problems that these big tech can create. So it's high time that Reserve Bank and the government seriously think of producing CBDC, find use cases. So with these few words, I think I'll stop. Once again, I would like to express my grateful thanks to Dr. Ray and NIBM for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your very insightful and informative Foundation Day address. We'll now go for question answers session. We'll pick up some questions and they are writing in the chat box, and I'll just read them. Questions like the first question from VG Tendon. He has written, people are going to use this as an equity item and it may attract gambling. So any viewpoint?
I would only remind him the warning advice given by our governor. Say that no, they are highly speculative, they are highly risky. I think Andrew Bailey rightly said, you invest if you are prepared to lose your money. See, there is a complete divide. There are tech entrepreneurs who are gung-ho about cryptocurrency and stablecoin. There are economists who are cautioning us. There are Nobel laureates who are cautioning us. There are bankers in between. Initially, they were a little skeptical. Yesterday, HSBC has announced they are going to probably get into cryptocurrency trading. Highly speculative. Either you can make money or you can lose the whole money. It's for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, another question has come. If CBDC is useful for India, who is designing and implementing it? So Shashank has raised this.
So obviously, as I said, central bank digital currencies, RBI would lead. But as I said, it requires a lot of legislative changes which the government has to do. Like privacy. We don't have a law on privacy. We don't have a law on cryptocurrency. We need amendments to RBI Act. The other part, technical part, they can do it. And we need an operating unit, like an IDRBT used to do the kind of, the payment systems operate on behalf of RBI. So you need somebody to technical infrastructure. NPCI is the right body to do that. Yeah, they've been doing a wonderful job so far as UPI is concerned. Because RBI can only give the guidelines, because today one of the best practices is central banks should not operate and oversee both. There's a conflict of interest. So they have to oversee and supervise, but the operation part they need to do, which is a public goal.
There is a question, sir. Implementation of CBDC will take place in which segment first, retail or MSME? If any.
So there is no sector as such, because when once you issue a currency, because in a pilot, we don't have full blown from day one, right? I think Deputy Governor has already indicated that I think it is a general purpose. Maybe my guess is they will start with retail. And there will be a pilot. Because as I said, 26 lakh crores physical cash in the system. Even if they do 2-3%, that is about 40-50,000 crores to start. So it will take at least 2 to 3 years, for my sense, to see some scale.
Amandeep Saini has written, we already have UPI and now e-rupee. That is essentially perform the same function as CBDC. So
no, it is not so. See, UPI involves transfer from one bank account to another bank account. Whereas digital currency, there is no need for a bank. It's completely total, but all these systems will coexist. Suddenly you can't say that I'll replace cash, I'll replace UPI. See, UPI requires a bank account. That's where the cost is involved, time is involved, settlement is involved, right? Settlement risk is also very significant, because you have seen that UPI volumes also about 4 lakh crores, 5 lakh crores.
Dr. Nagaraju has written, bank deposit money is important component of monetary system. Will CBDC affect the function of money creation by banks?
See, RBI has not spelled out what they do. My view is that they should not touch the bank deposit, they should not touch the reserves. That's not the purpose. I think the whole purpose is, I would be happy that 26 lakh crores is digitized. That itself will take you 6-7 years.
Arindam, if you allow me, I have a question.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. One of the things that they said that, China is quite ahead in CBDC with respect to others. Do you sense going forward, there could be some diminishing role of dollar in the whole currency market as a result of CBDC, possibly by China? I mean, is there a threat to hegemony of dollar from CBDC?
You're right. See, there is a hegemony of dollar. Even today, I think as per one estimate, 60% of the international reserves are in dollar. Whereas China also almost comes close to that GDP share of USA. But the share of yuan in the international reserve currency is only 2%. So it will take a long haul. But China is an tech advantage, and second is that BRI process, which is now covers about 100 countries. So they may go for these countries, and they'll be more worried at the Western sanctions. So it's a long haul, but we don't know. China is not so difficult to get any information.
So one question, sir, about rollout of CBDC, and how will central bank deal with the resistance from crypto firms and crypto investors?
See, it's like a gambling and speculation, right? Cryptocurrency. It is not a legal tender anywhere, except you have that, El Salvador is the only country, a poor country. It's already dollarized and all that. They don't have their own currency and all that. But there also it has a lot of resistance. See, we need to understand, we have seen Bitcoin price $40,000 goes to $60,000 in Bitcoin in 2 months. It again crashes to $30,000. So can an ordinary citizen can he withstand these kind of fluctuations and all? As RBI has a duty to protect consumers, right? It cannot be just a cashing.
Thank you. Any more questions?
If not, then perhaps you can.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll just give the vote of thanks, sir. I'll now go for it. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored and privileged to propose the vote of thanks on this momentous occasion of 52nd Foundation Day of our institute, National Institute of Bank Management. Let me first of all start by giving glory to the Almighty God for taking today's event a resounding success. I would like to express my gratitude to our Honorable Chief Guest, Sri B. Sambamurthy, former Director and CEO of Institute for Development and Research in Banking Technology, IDRBT Hyderabad, for enlightening us with your wisdom and providing invaluable insights on this topic. It was a great pleasure to listen to you, sir. We all are inspired by your great words. Our postgraduate students will be immensely benefited from your very informative and insightful lecture. Your good wishes, advice, and support for our institute have become the encouraging source of strength and motivation, sir. We are immensely grateful to you for your inspiring Foundation Day address, sir. Now I thank all the distinguished dignitaries, invitees present here for attending through online. Our senior professor, former directors, colleagues, I can see them, and our sincere thanks for supporting us in all our endeavors. Special thanks to the faculty members, administrative staff, and students who have worked hard to ensure that this online event becomes a memorable success. We are thankful to our director, Sir Dr. Partho Ray, for his leadership and continuous encouragement and support. Last but not the least, I thank you, my colleagues, for your cooperation and support in making this event a resounding success. Once again, I thank you all for your kind participation. Thank you so much. Let us now end this ceremony with national anthem. Kindly rise for the national anthem.
Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे, गाहे तव जय गाथा। जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे, जय 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 हे।
Thank you so much. We are closing the session now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hope it is useful.
Yes, very useful, sir. Very, very, very.